Imagine stepping off a blistering city sidewalk onto a patch of grass under a mature tree.
Oh, that immediate relief.
Right. And the ambient temperature just instantly plummets by up to 12 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, it's pretty drastic.
I mean, that isn't magic, and it isn't a broken thermometer. That is the very real, very dangerous physics of an urban heat island.
Exactly.
And today, we're looking at how cities are spending literally hundreds of millions of dollars to tear up the concrete and, well, get those 12 degrees back. Welcome to the deep dive.
Thanks. I'm really looking forward to this one.
We are taking you into a phenomenon that is reshaping the attractiveness, the value, and just the basic livability of our city neighborhoods. Specifically, we're going to look at Montreal today.
Yeah, Montreal is a fantastic case study for this.
For sure. And everything we are unpacking for you today is based on a really comprehensive publication provided by wikiresidence.ca and infodrone.ca.
Right.
And just a quick note for you, this research is available on those platforms in both text and audio versions, if you want to explore the data yourself later.
It is a really vital piece of research, honestly, because the mission today is not just to complain about the summer weather.
Right, as much as we all love to do that.
Yeah, exactly. But we are unpacking what these heat islands actually are at a structural level and why they've become a massive, measurable threat to public health and real estate.
And crucially, how Montreal is deploying both massive budgets and these highly clever neighborhood tactics to actually cool the city down.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the best way I can think to describe what happens in these specific zones is that the city starts acting like a giant unintentional thermal battery.
Oh, I like that. A thermal battery.
Yeah, you have this massive engine soaking up solar radiation all day long, right? Storing it deep in the pavement and the brick.
Uh-huh.
And then when the sun goes down and you expect that natural evening relief, the battery just switches into reverse.
Right.
Instead of cooling off, it just discharges all that stored heat directly into your living room all night long.
The thermal battery is the perfect analogy to understand the mechanics here. I mean, to figure out how to fix a battery that won't stop discharging heat, we first have to look at the anatomy of an urban heat island.
Okay, so what does that actually look like on the ground?
Well, we are talking about highly mineralized sectors. In urban planning, a mineralized zone means a high concentration of asphalt, heavy concrete, buildings covered in dark, tar-based roofs.
Just gray everywhere.
Yeah, and an almost total absence of tree canopy.
So there is absolutely nothing to block the sun before it hits the ground.
Right, and the ground itself is engineered to hold on to that heat. The materials are fundamentally designed to trap solar energy.
I mean, asphalt is black, so that makes sense.
Exactly. It's dark, so it absorbs maximum light, and it's really dense, meaning it has a high thermal mass. It holds on to that heat for hours. And the temperature gap this creates is staggering. The data in our sources shows that in downtown Montreal, these highly mineralized zones register surface and ambient temperatures that are 5 to 12 degrees Celsius hotter than surrounding rural or, heavily vegetated areas.
I mean, let that sink in for a second. Up to 12 degrees hotter just because of the physical ground you're standing on?
Yeah.
If it's a 30-degree summer day, your specific street could feel like 42 degrees.
Which is an absolute crisis for a municipality. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that trapped heat triggers a chain reaction.
A chain reaction? Like how?
Well, it strains the entire infrastructure grid. When a neighborhood doesn't cool down at night, it forces a drastic jump in municipal drinking water usage.
Right, everyone's trying to cool off or water their wilting gardens.
Exactly. And it causes electrical grid consumption to absolutely skyrocket because of intensive, nonstop air conditioning.
Makes sense.
And ironically, the exact same urban design that bakes the neighborhood during a heat wave is also the primary culprit for flooding it during a rainstorm.
Wait, so a lack of trees doesn't just make it hot, it actually causes sewer floods. How does heat connect to water management?
Okay, so it's not the temperature causing the flood, it's the physical nature of the material itself.
Oh, the asphalt.
Right, the asphalt and concrete that are acting as your thermal battery are completely impermeable. They act like a vacuum seal over the earth.
Like wrapping the ground in plastic?
Exactly. In a natural environment, a heavy summer rainstorm hits the ground and the soil absorbs it like a sponge.
But not in the city.
No. In a mineralized heat island, that water hits the sealed concrete and has nowhere to go but sideways. It all rushes straight into the municipal sewer systems in a matter of minutes.
Wow. And most older cities have combined sewer systems, meaning the rain runoff and the household wastewater use the same pipes, right?
Precisely. The system gets completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of water washing off the concrete.
Which means,
It forces the city to dump raw sewage overflows into nearby rivers, just to prevent it from backing up into people's basements.
ugh, that's terrible. So the same concrete that acts as a thermal battery during a drought acts as a dangerous funnel during a storm.
Yeah, it's a double threat. It bakes you when it's dry and floods you when it's wet.
Knowing those stakes, you can see why municipalities are finally treating this as a crisis. So the research shifts here into the macro-level mega projects Montreal is deploying.
Right.
A prime example highlighted in the sources is the Griffintown sector.
Yeah, Griffintown is a fascinating case study in urban restructuring. Historically, this is an area in the Settouest borough that was heavily industrial.
Like factories and warehouses.
Exactly. Warehouses, factories, and highly mineralized surfaces.
Yeah.
But it is currently undergoing a massive transformation into a high-density residential environment.
Right.
The city of Montreal is collaborating with private developers to build upwards of 18,000 new housing units there.
But they aren't just pouring more concrete, which is the cool part. The budget dedicated to public infrastructure here is $198 million.
That's a huge sum.
Yeah, it's mapped out in the metropolis's 2026 to 2035 10-year capital works program. And a massive chunk of that is dedicated to aggressive greening.
Right. They are messing around.
They're funding the development of 5.3 hectares of new parks and public spaces and completely redeveloping 10 kilometers of streets specifically to build a mature tree canopy.
And what's fascinating here is the sequencing of that $198 million.
What do you mean by sequencing?
Well, in traditional urban development, you build the residential towers first, and then you try to squeeze a sapling into whatever little square of sidewalk is left over.
Right, almost as an afterthought.
Exactly. But in Griffintown, they are integrating these green spaces from the initial planning stage. You're securing the parks and planting the canopy before the final concrete is poured.
Oh,
By
wow.
doing that, they guarantee what the real estate industry calls a location premium.
A location premium, meaning the mere presence of a park next door, allows developers to price the housing units higher, right? Securing the property value from day one. I mean, it makes sense when you have a somewhat blank slate like Griffintown, but what do you do with a place that is already buried under decades of industrial concrete?
Yeah, that's the harder part.
The research takes us to the east end of the island, specifically Montreal East, which is characterized by vast, sprawling industrial and commercial parks. It is just one giant, uninterrupted heat island.
It is arguably the most challenging environment to cool down. The city is running a massive catch-up effort there through a program called ILEU.
Which stands for Local Interventions in Environment and Urban Planning.
Right. Yes, exactly. And the budgets here are staggering because the logistics are just so complex. Recent city documents outline a $100 million agreement specifically for land rehabilitation
Wow.
and a separate $75 million budget purely for soil decontamination.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little. Is just throwing hundreds of millions at industrial zones enough, or is this just putting a green Band-Aid on a concrete broken leg?
I get why you'd ask that.
Yeah.
It sounds abstract until you look at the mechanism of why that decontamination is actually necessary.
Okay.
You cannot just jackhammer a hole in the asphalt of a 1950s petrochemical facility and plant an oak tree.
Because the soil is toxic.
Right. The legacy soil is so packed with heavy metals and industrial pollutants that a tree will simply die. So that $75 million is required to physically excavate the toxic dirt or use highly specialized phytoremediating plants to pull the toxins out of the ground just so a canopy can eventually survive.
So they're literally rebuilding the biological foundation of the neighborhood from scratch.
They have to. And it's not just municipal money moving the dirt either. We are seeing major corporate buy-in.
Really? Like who?
Hydro-Quebec, for instance, recently planted over 65 mature trees at their facilities in Anjou. They are taking massive heat-trapping institutional parking lots and partially converting them to permeable, vegetated spaces.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. We have these massive $100 million mega projects in industrial zones, but you can't bulldoze an existing densely populated residential neighborhood to build a park.
No, obviously not.
So the city is deploying a completely different strategy for the spaces where people already live. It's a concept called urban acupuncture.
I love that term.
It's so vivid. It is like the city is a stressed out patient, and instead of performing major invasive surgery, urban planners are placing tiny, highly precise green needles.
Right, just targeted relief.
Exactly. A garden here, a climbing vine there, just to relieve the thermal pressure exactly where it hurts the most.
Urban acupuncture captures the reality perfectly. It is all about granular, micro-level interventions. The sources highlight the Housing Cooperative's greening project, led by organizations like CRE Montreal and Sentier Urbain.
Okay.
They ran an intensive intervention cycle between 2023 and 2025, targeting 20 different housing co-ops,
Mm.
places like Jean Mance and L'Alliance.
And the numbers look small compared to Griffintown, but the impact is immediate. I mean, they demineralized 11,114 square meters of outdoor space.
Right.
They ripped up these little concrete courtyards and put 2,621 plants into the ground. But why does such a small physical change matter so much to a massive brick building?
Because it fundamentally alters the local thermal dynamics. If you rip up a 10 by 10 foot square of asphalt sitting right next to a brick wall, you're removing a localized heat battery.
Okay, that makes sense.
And if you plant a climbing vine up that wall, you're doing two things. First, you are physically shading the brick, preventing it from absorbing solar radiation.
Hold on a second.
Second, plants act as active natural air conditioners through a process called evapotranspiration.
They sweat.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
They pull water from the soil and release this vapor through their leaves. That process absorbs latent heat from the surrounding air, physically lowering the ambient temperature of that specific courtyard.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it isn't just about providing shade. The plant is actively cooling the oxygen around it.
Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, why are we relying on public grants to plant vines at housing co-ops? Why don't we just force property owners to fix their own buildings?
That's the logical next question.
Well, some boroughs are doing exactly that. We've talked about using public money, but the borough of Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie is using the law. They are using their zoning bylaws to force the adaptation of private real estate.
Yeah, it is the regulatory lever, and it shifts the financial burden from the city back to the property owner.
Which is huge.
In Rosemont, these regulations are already in effect for any new project or major renovation. If you own a building and need to replace a flat roof, you are legally obligated to install a white, highly reflective roof or a fully green, vegetated roof.
So you cannot just slap down dark, heat-absorbing tar anymore.
Nope.
You have to change the albedo of your building, meaning how much sunlight it reflects back into the atmosphere rather than absorbing it.
And that legal mandate extends to the ground level, too. If a commercial developer builds a new parking area with 10 or more spaces, the borough law dictates that at least 15% of that surface area must be dedicated to permeable landscaping.
They are legally mandating demineralization.
Yes. And this raises an important question for urban planners globally. Can we realistically subsidize our way out of the climate crisis? Or do we have to aggressively utilize private regulation to force the market to cool our cities?
I mean, Rosemont proves you can absolutely force the market.
Yeah, it does.
And this creates an amazing transition to bringing both of these strategies, the macro public funding and the microzoning regulations, into one single, heavily populated area. The deep dive provides a fascinating case study of the Parc-Extension neighborhood.
Oh, Parc-Extension is the ultimate proving ground for these theories. It's an incredibly dense neighborhood, historically packed with traditional Montreal plexes. Almost every square inch of space between the buildings was paved over the decades. It has a glaring lack of mature trees, and consequently, it's long been identified as an official red zone for thermal vulnerability.
It is the bullseye of the heat island effect.
Exactly.
But local organizations like Ville en Vert are teaming up with municipal authorities to deploy a whole series of rapid demineralization projects. They are literally peeling back the gray.
I like that phrasing.
Yeah, they are tearing up asphalt in schoolyards and parking lots and replacing them with bioretention basins.
And we should clarify what a bioretention basin actually does, because it isn't just a fancy puddle in a park.
Right. It's essentially a sunken, heavily planted sponge built right into the urban landscape.
Exactly that. They dig down, layer in specific gravel and engineered soils, and plant deep-rooted native vegetation.
Okay.
When a storm hits, instead of the water flashing off the asphalt into the sewer, it flows into this basin. The basin holds thousands of gallons of water, cleans it through the root systems, and lets it slowly percolate back into the groundwater over 48 hours.
Which takes the strain entirely off the municipal sewer system.
Yes.
And they are doing this in the alleyways, too. I mean, Parc-Extension is famous for its transit alleys, and they are converting them into what they call green and blue alleys.
Right. The green is the tree canopy.
And the blue means the alley is specifically regraded to channel rainwater into those bioretention basins we just talked about.
The funding context making this possible is massive, by the way.
Hmm.
Montreal's 2020 to 2030 climate plan has a stated goal to plant 500,000 new trees, specifically targeting these thermal red zones.
500,000 trees, that's no small feat.
No, it's huge. And they are tapping into millions of dollars from the federal government, channeled through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities exclusively for green infrastructure.
Okay, we've talked about the soil and the water, but what about the people?
The people?
Yeah, like, does tearing up asphalt actually change how people in Parc-Extension interact with each other?
Oh, absolutely. It profoundly changes the social dynamic of the space. The statistics on pedestrian foot traffic are incredibly telling. Yeah. When you take an asphalt transit alley, which is usually just a hot, unpleasant corridor for cars, and you transition it into a green alley with a mature canopy, daily foot traffic surges.
Because it stops being a utility corridor and becomes an outdoor living room.
That is exactly what happens. The gray asphalt gives way to shaded seating areas.
Mhm.
Instantly, you see residents gathering there at the end of the day.
Wow, that's beautiful.
It creates a space for casual socialization, which inherently makes the neighborhood feel safer because there are more eyes on the street.
Right.
And from a public health perspective, it provides a crucial, cool refuge for seniors or low-income residents who might not have air conditioning and would otherwise be trapped in sweltering apartments during a heat wave.
Which brings us to the grand takeaway of all this research. We have to synthesize the outcomes of all these projects, from the $198 million Griffintown parks to the tiny bioretention basins in Parc-Extension, to truly understand the global impact.
Yeah.
We're looking at an intersection of economics and public health and how greening solves for both simultaneously.
And the public health impact is arguably the most critical metric here. We established earlier that these mineralized sectors can be 12 degrees hotter than surrounding areas.
Yeah, which is terrifying.
Well, the flip side of that data is equally dramatic. The research shows that simply replacing a large section of asphalt with plants can lower an individual site's ambient temperature by a massive 5 to 10 degrees Celsius.
Dropping the temperature by 10 degrees in the middle of an August heat wave isn't a cosmetic luxury.
No, it is the difference between life and death for vulnerable populations. It directly prevents heat stroke.
Wow.
It drastically reduces the triage pressure on emergency rooms and the broader healthcare system during the summer months. By transforming these thermal batteries into shaded, breathable spaces, you're actively protecting the physiological health of the people who live there.
So what does this all mean? Like, have we officially crossed the threshold where a tree is no longer viewed as just a nice aesthetic addition, but is literally a measurable financial line item on a real estate ledger?
Unquestionably. The economic impact is direct, tangible, and measurable. Today's real estate buyers and developers are hypersensitive to the environmental quality of a neighborhood.
I can imagine.
When a street is lined with mature, evapotranspiring trees, when there is immediate proximity to a park or a green alley, it creates that location premium we discussed in Griffintown. It actively propels the market value of the surrounding residences.
And it saves money on the back end for the property owners.
Exactly.
If you lower the urban heat island effect around your building, you get a direct measurable drop in your energy consumption because you aren't fighting a 12-degree temperature penalty with your air conditioning system 247.
It is an essential, hard infrastructure investment. We used to think of infrastructure purely as concrete pipes and power lines,
Right.
Now, we have to recognize that the soil, the tree canopy, and the bioretention basins are equally critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
They manage the stormwater, they regulate the thermal load of the city, and they bind the community together.
We have taken you deep into the concrete jungle today and hopefully guided you out into a much cooler canopy. The sheer physical power of just removing a single square of asphalt and putting a living plant into the ground is remarkable.
It really is.
It repairs the water cycle, it turns off the thermal battery, and it brings neighbors out of isolation.
It does. But, synthesizing all of this research also leaves us with a critical, somewhat uncomfortable paradox to consider as we watch these cities transform.
A paradox.
Yeah. We've established that adding trees, building bioretention basins, and creating lush green alleys generates a highly desirable location premium that drives up market values.
Right. If you make a neighborhood beautiful and cool, more people want to live there and the price goes up.
So the question we have to ask ourselves as these multi-million-dollar mega projects roll out across historically vulnerable areas is this. Could these very necessary life-saving health interventions accidentally lead to green gentrification? Are we successfully making these dense neighborhoods safer from extreme heat, but inadvertently driving up the rent so much that we price out the exact vulnerable populations these cooling zones were built to protect in the first place?
That is a heavy, incredibly nuanced question to carry with you. It is the tension between fixing the environment and maintaining equitable housing.
Absolutely.
The next time you step outside on a sweltering summer night, take a close look at the pavement outside your own front door. Look at the roof of the building across the street and the alleyway behind your house. Ask yourself, is your neighborhood functioning as a thermal battery or an outdoor living room? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and keep questioning the ground beneath your feet.